Good morning, everybody. I just got off the phone with the insurance company because I hit a little deer last night. I missed a doe, a big deer, right in the middle of town. It's a little town. There's lots of wooded spaces, but it wasn't quite dark, right in the gloaming. I was coming down the hill just 6 blocks off the square. Right in the middle of town. And this doe came running across the road. And I braked, so when I hit the little one, I didn't even see the little one. She was too short until I hit her. And then I saw her. She popped up. Never saw her. She was never in my headlights. I missed the big deer and hit the little one, killed her. I hate killing stuff nowadays. I've killed enough things. I just don't have the stomach for it anymore. You know, I know that they're cattle, and I know that they're made to eat. But I just didn't like it. It shook me up a little bit. What's really funny is a year ago, this week, I hit another deer when we were having a revival at Galena. Now I'm working with the same folks doing outreach and doing some evangelistic services in Galena, and I hit another deer. I believe that Satan is trying to slow us down, trying to get my mind off of the work at hand. And if you don't believe that, that's up to you, but it's what I think. My wife believes it's true. Anything to hamper the progress of the Lord, Satan will try to do. He can't succeed, but he tries. What he does. So, the front end of the old Chevy's a little messed up. I'm waiting. I put in a claim already. I was on the phone by 8:30. I wasn't sure what time they opened, but they were open. And claims adjuster will call me, and we'll get it fixed. Remember what I told you younger men. Serving the Lord will cost you. If you decide to serve Christ, you'll have to pay something. And just be lucky that you pay here with oppression from the devil and not with real persecution. Our brothers and sisters are jailed, tortured, and executed daily because of their faith in Christ. And as I've said, the only reason they don't kill us here is because it's still against the law. Soon, it will no longer be against the law to kill Christians, and we'll be open game. It'll be interesting to know then whose faith is real and whose isn't, because if the penalty for being a Christian is death, it will thin the herd. The pretenders will flee, and all that will be left are the true believers. God always separates the sheep from the goats, and he's, in a very real way, he's not waiting for Matthew chapter 25 to do it. So that is the reason for my somber demeanor this morning. It doesn't mean I'm any demeanor than I usually am. No. Chapter 50 of the book of the prophet Jeremiah. We have come a long way in this book. 3 chapters left. One longish one, one really long one, and one short one. But there's a lot in here, and I'm going to try to challenge you as it challenges me and it challenged students before me to try to understand what's going on, because there is only a partial fulfillment. There's only been a partial fulfillment against Babylon and Chaldea. You know, Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees, it's ancient Babel, Mesopotamia, the civilization between the rivers. Matter of fact, I think that's what Mesopotamia means, is the between the rivers, the land between the rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Beginning in verse 1 of chapter 50, and then we're going to read up to a certain point, and then we'll preach it a little, and then we're going to read in another place. The word that the Lord spake against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Declare ye among the nations, and publish, and set up a standard. Publish and conceal it not. Let everybody know. Say, Babylon is taken. Bel is confounded. That was their great god. Merodach is broken. Bel was their Baal. That is the origin of Baal. Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded. Her images are broken in pieces. Merodach was the Ashtoreth. Merodach was the goddess. You know, the female side of all these pagan religions, you know, was Nimrod and Semiramis and Osiris and Isis. And the woman always had a baby. The child, the woman and child cult, Semiramis and Tammuz. Isis and the Queen of Heaven, and Horus, the child, the Madonna and the child, the perpetual Virgin Mary and her child, who is supposedly Jesus. It's a cult. It goes all the way back to Babel. And in Babylon, it was Bel and Merodach instead of Baal and Ashtaroth. It's the same principle. I've always wondered why child sacrifice was a part of it, because it doesn't make any sense to the practical mind. And the mother and child cult, but it's always there. The word that the Lord spake against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Declare ye among the nations, and publish, and set up a standard, and publish, and conceal not, and say Babylon is taken. Good morning, Gayla. Merodach is broken in pieces. Bel is confounded. Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded. Her images are broken in pieces. For out of the north there cometh a nation up against her, which shall make her land desolate. The Medes and the Persians took Babylon from the Babylonians, from the Chaldeans, took it from Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar the Great. In 539 BC, they did not come from the north. What is north of Persia, modern day Iran? Russia. No army has ever taken Babylon from the north. Alexander would take Babylon away from the Persians from the east. I mean, from the west, not from the north. Rome would fight with Babylon for 150 years, but would never take her, would never occupy Babylon. So there's the first phrase in verse 3 of chapter 50 is, for out of the north there cometh up a nation against her. Well, there hasn't yet. Which shall make her land desolate, and none shall dwell therein. Well, that wasn't the Persians. They walked in without a fight. That wasn't the Greeks. Alexander defeated Darius II's armies in the field and took Babylon with a victory parade and not a fight. And then the capital was in good shape, and Alexander made Babylon his capital. And none shall dwell therein. Been people living there forever. There's people there now. Not a lot. Matter of fact, that area is called the city of Hilla now. So they shall remove, they shall depart, both man and beast. That never did happen. In those days and in that time, saith the Lord, the children of Israel shall come, and they and the children of Judah together, going and weeping, and they shall go and seek the Lord their God. That certainly hasn't happened yet. Now, later on in this prophecy, we'll talk about how Judah returns to Jerusalem, the exiles from Babylon. But as not Israel, not the northern kingdom, not Israel and Judah together. Israel, the northern kingdom, was already dispersed and scattered. When Assyria took the northern kingdom of Samaria. So the children of Israel shall come, they and the children of Judah together. That hasn't happened yet. Going and weeping, that hasn't happened yet. They shall go and seek the Lord their God. That hasn't happened yet. And they shall ask the way to Zion with their faces thitherward, saying, come, let us join ourselves to the Lord in perpetual covenant that shall not be forgotten. That hasn't happened yet. It goes on to talk about later in this chapter about the return to Judah. And Jeremiah predicts the return of Judah, the exile in Babylon, coming back to the land, coming back to Jerusalem. Isaiah prophesied that Cyrus would give them an order to return to Jerusalem. He named Cyrus over 100 years before Cyrus was born. Now, I made a statement that when the Medes and Persians came in, that they did not destroy Babylon. As a matter of fact, they took it without a fight in 539 BC, and I would like to read you the passage in the Bible where that happens. And throughout these last chapter 51 and chapter 52, I'll be referring to a lot of things because these prophecies in chapter 50 against Babylon have either not been fulfilled or they've only been partially fulfilled. If they haven't been fulfilled, then we know of a surety that they're in the future, because God always does exactly what says he's going to do. There is no variation. There is no. So if it hadn't happened exactly like he said, it hasn't happened yet. You might want to turn with me to chapter 5 of Daniel. That's 3 books, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and then Daniel. past Jeremiah chapter 5. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast of 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. People used to think that this was just a Bible story, just something some ignorant people, these ignorant God worshippers, these ignorant Jews made up. Until recently, we find coins and documents in the digs about Belshazzar. Belshazzar was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. His father actually wasn't liked very much, so he left. Some called him Merodach, some called him Nabonidus, and he didn't like being king, and the people didn't like him, so he spent his time off in other places like what we would call Asia Minor, Turkey, and in that area. And he was just living like a king somewhere else in the empire because he didn't want to be the king, and he didn't like the people, and the people didn't like him. So his son, Belshazzar, is ruling as a regent, and he is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. And history has proven that out. The archaeologists have found out that that is true. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem. And that the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines might drink therein. This young man thought a lot of himself, didn't he? He had wives, plural, and concubines, plural, at the table with him. Boy, it must have been some party. You know, personally, I've always thought about Jacob and his two wives, Leah, Rachel, and his two concubines. I just wonder what it was like at the supper table. Oh boy. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Then they brought out the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. Remember Nebuchadnezzar's army, before he destroyed the temple, they took out all the gold, all the brass, all the silver, all the tapestries, all the scarlet, all the fine linens, and everything that was worth anything they took out of the temple, and then they burned it. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass, of iron, of wood, of stone, idols, drinking out of the vessels of the house of God that Nebuchadnezzar took his booty back to Babylon. Verse 5, in the same hour came forth the fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Boy, nervous, ain't he? The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers. That's what his grandfather did one time, remember? That's one of the ways that God gave Daniel prominence in the kingdom was that he interpreted the king's dreams. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation of shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Well, he couldn't be half ruler because Belshazzar's father was absent from court. Belshazzar was ruling perhaps as a viceroy, as a regent. And he was ruling in the stead of the king, in other words. And so he couldn't give away half the kingdom because that would take everything away from him. So he was willing to give away a third of the kingdom. I don't know what his father would have thought about that, but apparently he didn't care because he wasn't around. The third ruler in the kingdom, says the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Just like when the magicians came to Nebuchadnezzar, they couldn't figure it out. Then King Belteshazzar, that's Daniel's name, Belteshazzar. This is Belshazzar. Greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonied. Good morning, Linda. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in that kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, grandfather, the king, I say, thy father, grandfather, made master of the musicians, of the magicians, astrologers, and Chaldeans, and soothsayers, for as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sayings, and dissolving of doubts. Remember, he could make you quit worrying, Belshazzar. That's what the Word of God does. It makes you quit worrying. Were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show you the interpretation. See, King Nebuchadnezzar, he named Daniel and the Hebrew children. He gave them Babylonian names, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and their names were Hananiah. Let's see, what were their names? The three Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Oh, I have it right here. It's on the tip of my finger, not the tip of my tongue. And he gave them names. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel became Belteshazzar. But Belshazzar is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. And the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Verse 13 of chapter 5 of Daniel. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said to Daniel, Art thou Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king, my grandfather, brought out of Jewry? I have heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. What buttering him up, isn't he? And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I've heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel's an old man now. He's retired. He's already had all the gold chains he needs. His friends or many of his friends are dead. But he comes back. We'll see later. He comes back to help out the Persians and to serve them, because he's still a captive. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. I don't need anything else. I got everything I need. I will read you the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. For the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, languages, trembled and feared before him. Whom he would have slew, whom he would, he slew. Whom he would, he kept alive. And whom he would, he set up. And whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, his mind hardened in pride, he was dropped. He was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses, and they fed him with grass like oxen. And his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart. Though thou knewest all this. Surely you've heard the stories about your grandfather going crazy and then being restored to his throne. Everybody knows it. Surely you know it, O Belshazzar. But thou hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee. And thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of gold and silver, and brass, and wood, and iron, and stone, which see not, hear not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and every breath is in his hands. You only breathe next because he wants you to, friend. Remember that. In whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. And he controls your life. He controls your every step. He controls your breath. Whether you get any or not, or whether you take another step or not, and you haven't glorified him. Have you? Have you glorified him? Take time to give glory to the Lord. Thank him that you're able to breathe. My wife, Velda's got trouble breathing. She's got emphysema. Breath is a very precious thing. You quit breathing, you die. Glorify God. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. This is the hand of God, or a hand from God, writing on the wall. And this is the writing that was written. Mene Tekel Upharsin. And the interpretation of the thing, many. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Says it twice. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel. thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, which would have been the Hebrew form of the Chaldean word or Aramaic word, Upharsin and Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. How do I know that? I don't know any Aramaic. I don't know anything about languages. I just know what I've read in the studies. Somebody in a tie who was Dr. So-and-so, they argued about what it meant. That's what they come up with. But it doesn't matter whether it's a translation or a transliteration or just an equivalent, an estimation of what the word was. What it meant was that the kingdom of Babylon, the kingdom of Belshazzar, is divided now and given unto the Medes and the Persians. This was happening on one night in 539 BC. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with a scarlet, put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. What happened was this. In 539 BC, the Persians and the Medes were cooperating. They had been fighting each other, and now they cooperate and they take Babylon. And they come up with this project, with this proposal that one will rule for a certain time, then another one gets to rule. It would have a Mede and a Persian and a Mede and a Persian. But that didn't last long because the Persians were stronger, and they finally subsumed the Medes, just like Babylon had at some point subsumed and gathered in all of Assyria. Well, good morning, Janice. God bless you. Give my best to Ronald. So what happened was when they took Babylon, Cyrus, who was one of the generals, they diverted the Euphrates River. And there was a channel that went through the walls of the city, these great walls. Remember, the walls of Babylon, they were so thick that you could have chariot races on top of the walls. You've probably seen the drawings of it, or maybe seen it portrayed in a movie. It really was one of the wonders of the world. They thought they were impregnable. But General Cyrus, he diverted the flow of water that went into the city. So it went in under a little gate that you couldn't, get through, couldn't float through. But the water went down when they diverted the channel. And it was at night. And so the whole army just marched in on the channel bed. And they took Babylon in one piece. They took it without fighting a battle, except for killing a few guards. And they dragged Belshazzar out and some of his men and slew them, just immediately cut their throats and disposed of their bodies and took their women and took their gold and took their wine and ate their food. That's what people did back then. You got something, we'll take it from you. It's kind of like what the government does to you now. Or these scammers that call you on the phone. And sometimes you don't know the difference. Although, let me be fair. The government wants to get a hold of you. They send you a letter. They don't send you an email or text you And they don't want your personal information over the phone because they've already got your personal information. They don't need it. So, in all fairness to the government, they're not criminal in that regard. Uh, the Medes and the Persians took Babylon without a battle. They did not destroy Babylon. They took it in a single night by marching in on the bed of a dried up channel from which they had diverted the flow of the Euphrates, and it was the city's water supply. And they marched in, and they went straight into the palace and killed the king and all his men. And that's how the Medes and the Persians took Babylon. They didn't cast a mount against it. They didn't shoot arrows inside of it. They didn't climb up the walls and burn the city. No, they snuck in and killed the leadership and took the city intact. I'm sure that the Persian generals were sleeping with the wives and concubines of the king before morning, because that's what they did in war back then. Take. The point I'm trying to make is it says here in chapter 50 of Jeremiah, it says that they would make her desolate, and that the army would come out of the north. This army didn't, and an army would come out of this army came out of the south and the east, not the north. So that's how Babylon fell, and the Jews were still there captive. They came back under Cyrus, who may have been Cyrus II. There's a little quibble because some people think that Darius was a title instead of a man's name, like Pharaoh or king or majesty. I'm not a linguist, so I'm not sure, but no matter how it was, the Medes and the Persians took Babylon without a fight, so Babylon was not destroyed then. As we go along, I'll show you that Babylon was never destroyed, and it has never faced the complete destruction and desolation that is described in chapter 50. We only made it for 5 verses. But that's how the end of Jeremiah is going to be. There is much material here, and I would be remiss in my duty if we didn't at least touch upon it. I love you with all my heart. Thank you for watching. My heart is heavy because I killed that critter, and now I will say one thing. When I hit that deer last year, the insurance company and the people at Mr. Dent, they were all wonderful. And all I did was I had to pay my $500 ante. You know, you got to pay $500 to get in the game. They call it your deductible. You got to pay that no matter what it costs, but then they take care of all the rest of it. And I can drive it right now, but it doesn't look too good. But that's all right, you know. If I had to keep driving it like it is, I could manage. But the Lord has blessed me. And so I intend to thank God for the blessing and, if possible, have the work done. God bless you all. I know that some of you must be praying for me because I didn't get mad. I just got sad because I killed that little deer. I don't think I'd have been so sad if I'd have killed the doe. But if I'd have killed the doe, there'd be a lot more damage to the car because the fawn was so small. Even the insurance agent said, well, you got off cheap. I don't feel like it this morning because I don't like killing stuff. God bless you. Your big He-Man will be back tomorrow. I won't be sad anymore. Now, those of you who know me know That's really the only thing I have to recommend me, is because God forgave me of so much sin. My heart is tender. And I don't like violence. I don't like death, even among the critters, because God made them too. And in the garden, when Adam and Eve sinned and he clothed them with animal hides, where do you think they came from? He had to kill some little animals to make those hides. I believe they were lambs. He had to kill creatures that he had not intended to kill. He created creatures and he loved them, but because of man's sin, then death entered into the world, and the first death were the animals that were sacrificed to clothe Adam and Eve. In the kingdom, I don't know if there'll be any cars or not. There won't be any deer hitting the highway and left to die. Well, I was fortunate. A man picked up the carcass and took it with him. Good morning, Martha. I was just saying goodbye. I think I've gone on a little long. Oh my. Well, you know what? We only made it to verse 5. If I keep trying to bring out everything in these verses, we're going to have some long sermons. I'll try to break them up a little better. Nobody has time to sit around for an hour in the morning and listen to this stuff. Maybe you're listening to it in your car. God bless you.